Yeah.
Hmm.
Larry, yesterday we were talking, I was talking with Richard Wolf and Michael Hudson, and Michael Hudson came out with a very interesting idea on the boat. He said maybe they had Epstein files on the
Yeah.
boat.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Nima's down in the middle, ain't he? So we're gonna do it like this. All right, man. Let's check out these videos. I'll do it like this.
And lost in politics at the top all the rest of the time that they're in uniform. We don't have a general in the United States Army, Nima, that I would follow to a shithouse.
It's just this is the end of the last conversation, and I love Nima's reaction to this, but we start up after this.
Yeah. Larry, you didn't mention the case of Venezuela. What's your take on that? We've seen a footage, a new footage that shows that two F-16 fighter jets flying directly over the USS Jason. And what's going on in the Caribbean Sea, and what do they want from Venezuela?
Well, let's separate out what we're being told, but then also raise the question of, is it true? I've had some suggest that
Always a good question.
what we're seeing was an AI generated image, but possibly. But here's what the story just doesn't make sense. Okay, so this is one of these fast boats. It's got 3 outboard motors on it, and they're going from Venezuela to America with drugs. How are you going to refuel those? Because those outboard motors are going to last. They can probably run for about an hour, maybe 2 hours. They're going to have more fuel. Well, I didn't see a tanker, oil tanker floating by to, pull up and give them, they could buy gas. And it's not like there are floating gas stations in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico / Gulf of America. That's number one. Number two, the goal of drug trafficking is to move drugs, narcotics. You got 11 people on board the boat. There's no room for the drugs. you know, so and to label Maduro as some big cartel guy, it's complete. It's just nonsense. Look, I've my consulting firm, Berg Associates. We were at our height. We were 3 partners. My other 2 partners, one would have been the chief of international ops for DEA, and then the other one ran undercover money laundering operations in New York City for DEA. And so we worked, our very first case was the Bank of New York Russian money laundering case. So we worked money laundering, drug trafficking cases. This is not how those cartels operate, by loading up a boat like that. That may have been the case in the 1980s with Miami Vice, but that's not the case today. But the broader issue, and the one that I find so disturbing, is this was an act of, if it happened, and if we really did kill those people, it's an act of murder. It's crime. Look, if they're really drug trafficking and you spot the boat, the first thing you do is you try to stop it and board it. Now, if they start firing at you, if they start shooting at you, okay, then a rule of engagement would come into play, and you can fire back. It would be appropriate to fire back and kill them. But that's not what we had here. We saw zero evidence that boat was posing any kind of threat to the life of any U.S. military personnel.
This is even more evidence as to why this is a ritual, right? This was something that was put on for us to see so we could sit here and accept it. And any of you out there that have people reporting this story to you in any other way other than the way he described it, as a murder and a violation of international law, that is somebody that is propagandizing the news in an effort to twist you into their narrative. Okay, trust that.
Law enforcement personnel, none whatsoever, and yet we killed them first. Sorry, the other thing I did over the course of 23 years was script counterterrorism exercises for JSOC. And I never saw, out of 253 exercises that I was involved with scripting and executing, I never saw a single rule of engagement where Delta Force or SEAL Team 6 or our 75th Rangers were given permission to shoot unarmed people that hadn't fired on them.
Do we have rules anymore? Do we have laws anymore? What good are they if we're not going to follow them?
The ROE was always pretty strict. So this is like saying it's okay to go kill them just because we think they're bad. So the whole thing stinks.
And that is what this is. And moreover, this is, like I was saying, a ritual so that all of us as American citizens can be okay with anything carried out under that directive. Accept whatever we tell you. And we can use violence and we can violate law and we can violate your rights as long as the person's a terrorist or a bad guy or against Israel.
I think this is part of a broader the renewal of Trump's failed effort in his first term to replace Nicolas Maduro through a color revolution. And this is the next attempt at it to force him out and get control of Venezuelan oil.
Yeah.
Nima, let me just add that either Larry's right that this is a possible visual chimera, however you say that word. I've been schooled in how to say it recently. That was put together to scare other people who might challenge what we are saying about drug trafficking and so forth. Or, as Larry indicated, it's a complete and utter violation of international law, of domestic law, and of the rules of engagement that the military I served in always operated under. It's unconscionable to think they would have done something like that video depicts, because it is so illegal, and on top of all of that, it's unethical and immoral as hell. It is not in accordance with the way any military, let alone the empire's military, the American military, should be operating. And I agree with Larry that the whole way they painted it, the surface and the engines and the size of the boat and the number of people on the boat, did not comport with drug trafficking. I worked with the Cubans in the Mona Passage. I worked with the Coast Guard and the U.S. military that were down there liaisoning with the Cuban. And I don't know if it's changed miraculously, but they were really, in many cases, hard-pressed to catch the boats that actually carried drugs, because they were these huge, very fast, heavily fueled boats, cigarette boats, people called them in the jargon, that just raced at 90 knots across a relatively calm sea, and even 60 or 70 in a sea state 3 or a sea state 4 sea. So this is not, it just doesn't comport with the, and the other thing we encountered was these submarines they were building. They were small submarines, and there were only 1 or 2 people, and the rest was cocaine or whatever. And they were smuggling under the water, if you will, when they moved, showing their fear at that time of we had really closed down on both the Pacific side and the Caribbean side of what might be called the U.S.'s 10 to 11% of interdiction. Well, guess what happened when we did that, by the way? You know where they moved? And one of my Marines pointed this out to the Atlantic Command commander when there was an Atlantic Command. We had a seminar down there. If you do that, if you really close off and take 10 to 11%, which we have never achieved beyond, on both sides, Atlantic or Caribbean and Pacific, Gulf of Mexico and Pacific, then you're going to force it to go up the land in Mexico. That's what happened, and we contaminated the hell out of Mexico. That's what they did.
So, of course, what he's talking about is, the arrest, the wars against Pablo Escobar and the like, right? The Colombian drug cartels that the CIA waged in the 80s and 90s. And all that did was strengthen the overland routes and the cartels that controlled the pieces of land all the way up to the border. And we saw what that created now over the last 20 years.
So this whole drug war effort is a farce in many respects, and we are the ones who make it a farce. Yeah. This is not only farcical, but it's incomprehensible that we would have done this. And let's face something else too. I don't know that much about Trinagua, but as I understand it from people who do, and Larry maybe can comment on this, their main money-making enterprise is people trafficking, not drug trafficking. If those people were killed and they were people being trafficked, holy mackerel, those are just innocent people who probably paid $2,500 US to get on that boat and make a little short trip around to another place where they get picked up by some other unconscionable people, taken to the Darien Gap or whatever, and flooded into the flow of traffic south to north. We're killing those kind of people? Well, Bibi's doing it in Gaza every single day, 5 times as many people. So is this the way we're going to wage war in the future? This is not a good development. Yeah.
Larry, yesterday we were talking, I was talking with Richard Wolff and Michael Hudson, and Michael Hudson came out with a very interesting idea on the boat. He said maybe they had Epstein files on the boat.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. All right, man. On that note, listen, this is nothing but that, guys. Again, if you're somebody out there, an American that's getting your news, trying to get the truth, you know, you're looking for the truth, you're taking in the news, you're trying to decipher what's going on. You've kind of like, you know, the mainstream is giving you a certain rap and they're lying to you or whatever. So you've ended up on some YouTube channels and you've ended up with some alt news sources. If you're somebody like that and your news sources are reporting this as some type of like victory, some positive thing for the Trump administration, a win for Trump, blowing up the drug boat, like I said before, man, like you are being propagandized. These people are lying to you and they don't want you to see things for what they are because they want to keep you dumb and be able to yank you around however they need to at any given moment. You're welcome. All right, guys. Till next time, I'll catch y'all later. But do it this way. Yeah, till next time, I'll catch you guys later. God bless everybody out there. Hope everybody has a good, productive week coming up. And free Palestine, stop the siege in Gaza. Prayers out to all the people and people there, and prayers out to the Samud flotilla. I'm looking forward to see landfall being made. So till next time, see you guys soon. Peace.